A team-by-team review of the 2025 NFL Draft. All 32 teams, we're talking about it all today. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Tuesday, April 29 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. A few days removed from the end of the 2025 NFL Draft, we had our 10 big takeaways from the draft on yesterday's episode. Today, we'll be talking about every single team. Of course, we have fans of all 32 teams here on NFL Spotlight. We talked about some of them yesterday. We didn't talk about everyone, so we're going to do it here today, and we're not going to waste much time. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? We have a lot to get to here. We're going to go team by team, try to go a little bit like mock draft style, try to go a little bit fast, but a lot to get to here.
Yeah, exactly. Neither you or I are film specialists, so we're not going to waste our time trying to tell you exactly how guys are going to fit into defensive schemes, but we are going to tell you how they filled out their rosters, because I think that is something that we do have a little bit of experience in, particularly you. I'm just here to talk and look pretty. All right, let's go ahead and just get right to it. Let's go to the AFC East. Let's start with the defending champions of that division. We got the Buffalo Bills. Bills went defense with their first 5 picks, including Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston. He was the 30th pick on the draft. Got to say, nailed that on my unreleased mock draft. Brandon Beane was on the defensive mode with the local radio guys after he told them to, quote unquote, not my words, stop bitching about his approach to the draft and not targeting offensive players until late. What were your thoughts on their approach to the draft and their decision to go pretty heavy on defense?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Brandon Beane. I mean, if you look at what they did last year, I mean, they were scoring a lot of points. Josh Allen was the MVP of the entire league. So I don't know why there was so much frustration out of Buffalo for not going out and getting a receiver until the 7th round, pick number 240 in this draft. But this is a team that last year basically was like, we don't need to have a number 1 receiver. We're going to spread the ball around, and it worked out. The problem was the defense. I mean, especially at the end of the year, you saw in the AFC Championship game when Christian Bedford got injured, they just did not have anybody there who could be a legitimate cover guy, and it was a problem. And after the game, Sean McDermott in the AFC Championship game said how much it hurt them for not having them. So I understand totally where Brandon Beane is coming from, and using defense here with the first 5 picks, like you said, Maxwell Hairston for some teams was the number 2 cornerback in this draft. I mean, we said that in a episode that we did about a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about guys who could go in the first round. I listed Maxwell Hairston. I mentioned how everyone in the media has Will Johnson as a quarterback number 2. And I was like, teams do not view it like that. And obviously we know now a big reason for that was medical, but they go out and get Maxwell Hairston. You can make an argument, maybe Trey Amos was better, maybe some other guy was better, but no, they like Hairston. He's a willing tackler, even for a guy for his size. TJ Sanders, defensive tackle out of South Carolina, they traded up to get him, made an aggressive trade up. They need to shore up the middle of the interior of the defensive line. He is somebody who could do that. And Landon Jackson, the edge out of Arkansas, I thought he was going to go in the 2nd round. He is somebody who could literally fly around the field. And really look around this entire team, what they did this offseason. They've added a lot of defensive pieces, even adding a guy like Joey Bosa, bringing a couple of veteran cornerbacks back to the team who left them or they moved on from, like a Dane Jackson, Tre'Davious White. They want to make sure they have pieces there, depth pieces, and have rotational pieces as well. The offense did the job last year. They added guys in free agency as well when it comes to the offensive side, like signing a Josh Palmer. The defense is where they had to fix it up, and that's why for their first 5 picks, they went on defense. They added some other guys here on the offense late in the round, more of the developmental guys, but they're okay on offense. It's the defense here, and Brandon Beane, I agree with him. I think they did a great job of here addressing the needs in the defense, and their hope is they could stop those teams once it comes to January football, whenever the time comes.
All right, let's move over to the Miami Dolphins. They took Michigan defensive tackle Kenneth Grant with the 13th pick, offensive lineman Jonas Avuinaya with the 2nd round selection out of Arizona. They didn't have a pick again until the 5th round. They took Quinn Ewers in the 7th, which I think is an interesting guy to have there with Tua along with Zach Wilson. So should be a fun room. What do you think about this class there in Miami?
Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins class was interesting because Kenneth Grant going where he did, I thought he was somebody who would go down there somewhere in the 20s in this draft. And of course, they take him there at number 13. But I look at this team, I mean, I think the biggest glaring hole on this roster entering draft week was probably cornerback with Jalen Ramsey set to be out the door. They've mutually agreed to move on from him. That cornerback room is very, very bleak, I would say, right now. And they didn't address it until the 5th round in this draft, taking Jason Marshall Jr. out of Florida. So I have some questions about that. I do know at number 13, when they took Kenneth Grant, they milked that clock all the way down because they were trying to trade down and get more picks. I thought they might take Jahdae Barron, the cornerback out of Texas. They decided not to. Grant is going to be an immediate starter, immediate impact player, but I just go back to the fact that they had a defensive tackle on this roster 2 years ago who they let go in free agency with Christian Wilkins. They would not have this issue right now if they just brought him back. You look at their second round pick, Jonah Saviliana. I'm really bad with pronunciation, but the guard slash tackle out of, there we go. Ben is my
I may have
pronunciation
just looked it
expert
up
over
on
here.
X to make sure that I was hearing him say it right.
There we go. I mean, you didn't have to admit that. We would have believed you just knowing it. But yeah, this is somebody who, again, guard slash tackle, could play both, but they allowed Robert Hunt to leave him for into last year. So like there are homegrown players where they didn't need to be in this situation. And now here they are. They were in these situations because they let them go. So that is my only thing about Miami. But I think both those guys could be day one starters for them. But just looking at the entire process of how Miami has handled this over the last couple of years, this is a team that I think has a lot of veteran players and they needed more young guys and they're kind of stuck in the middle right now. So they didn't have to be in that situation. Now they're moving on from Ramsey. They have this distraction with Tyreek Hill, who I think is going to be on the roster. But the point is they could have done better with their resources previously to not be in the situation where they were here in the 2025 NFL draft. So that's my only thing about it. And I'm curious to see what they do over here with the cornerback room as we eventually get to OTAs and mini camp and training camp, where it's going to be obvious they need more guys there and what they do there.
All right, up next, we have the New York Jets. They skipped on the chance to get their tight end, Tyler Warren, with the 7th pick, instead going out to Mizzou to take Armand Membu. And they did get their 2nd-round tight end, though, with Mason Taylor, the son of Jason Taylor, the legend, also the nephew of Joy Taylor, which I just recently learned. Also, a few other guys they took with Azarie Thomas out of Florida State. You know, it wasn't, like, to me, the sexiest bunch of players that they went with, but a good mix of guys, right?
I like what they did, and it's a really good job in the first 3 rounds addressing needs with guys who are starter level talents, like you mentioned with Membu, Taylor, and Thomas specifically, and even the guys they got later. These are like captains for teams, guys who are leaders, and that's kind of what Aaron Glenn is looking for. I also commend them with the process because we played a video of John Spytek a couple of weeks ago here on the show talking about whenever there's one position where is filled with talent in a different position where it's not filled with talent, we're okay taking the not so full position early than coming back to the other position late. Like everyone thought, including me, that they would take Tyler Warren at number 7, but the Jets were like, hey, Armand Membu is a really good offensive tackle, one of the best ones in this draft. We know there's going to be a big run on offensive lineman. By the time we get to pick 42, none of our guys are going to be there. We're going to take the bet right now that we're going to take Membu now. We're going to come back around at 42 and get our tight end and hope that Mason Taylor is there. And that worked out perfectly for them, right? So Taylor is not exactly Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, but he is still a really, really good tight end, somebody who I think teams in the bottom of the first round were thinking about taking him here in this draft. So I like the process they took. And really, you look at what they've surrounded Justin Fields with now going into his first year as a starting quarterback. The offensive line is set. And it's not just set with like, last year was like Tyron Smith was there. Like, could this guy actually hold up? Morgan Moses was there. He's been beat up his entire career and somehow plays through it. But this year, it's like young guys who are good players with Olufishano left tackle, left guard John Simpson, center Joe Tippmann, right guard Elijah Vera Tucker, right tackle is Armand Membu. That is 5 guys that could be there for the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years potentially. So that is a really good setup for a quarterback in his first year. And then just the surrounding pieces, Breece Hall at running back in a contract year. Their GM said there have been no trade talks, even though there has been some rumors out there about maybe something's going on. Wide receiver, now you have Garrett Wilson. At tight end, you bring in Mason Taylor, and the offensive line is set. So there are pieces here and foundational pieces. And the one thing that is very true, the defense of the Jets is still very good. Like there were a lot of players from the previous regime who were there. They just didn't really play well last year once Robert Saleh was fired. Now you bring in Aaron Glenn, who is a player's coach. This is a team that has talent, and I like what they did over here. And I think the offensive line being fortified in front of Justin Fields is a very big deal going to 2025.
All right, let's cap off the division with the New England Patriots. They went chalk at number 4 with LSU tackle Will Campbell, Ohio State running back Travion Henderson in the second round, Kyle Williams, the Washington State receiver in the third round, as well as Jared Wilson, the Georgia offensive lineman. The Pats have had a full roster makeover this offseason. We talked about it yesterday's episode. Go back, listen to that as well. But what do you think of their overall draft haul?
Might be arguably the best draft, at least on paper, for me. I mean, from the first four picks you mentioned there, those are all potentially starters day one for them. I could make a case for all four of them starting for this team. Like Jared Wilson probably won't start over Garrett Bradbury, but he is somebody who I thought could go in the second round. They got him in the bottom of the third round. Will Campbell is just the perfect example of a player that Mike Vrabel is trying to tell his guys, this is who I want you to be, and this is who we want our guys to be moving forward. So I love what they did. Trayvon Henderson, probably the best all-around running back in this draft. I think Ashton Genty is hands down the best running back, but what Henderson does from a pass protecting standpoint, like Drake May could stand in there and be like, hey, be next to me and take care of that guy right there. Like he'll do it for you. He does the dirty work. So love that pick. Another Mike Vrabel guy. Kyle Williams is somebody who I think there was a consistency issue there with Washington State, but coming in, he kind of reminds you a little bit of a Stephon Diggs light. And of course, who's there right now in New England? It is Stephon Diggs. So love that pick as well. We mentioned Jared Wilson before, but really this entire draft, even in the fifth round, getting the edge out of LSU, Braden Swinson, did not think he's somebody who's going to drop all the way to the fifth round. So overall, when this offseason started, when the Patriots hired Mike Vrabel, arguably the worst roster in the NFL. What they did combined with free agency, we talked about it yesterday, like you said, Ben, combined free agency and the draft together, there has been an upheaval of talent over here in New England, and I love it. I love it. I think they're in the right step. And like I said yesterday, this is a team, I don't expect playoffs for them. But they're going to be in games this year where they are just so annoying and you could not get rid of them. Like they're going to be in the fourth quarter against the Bills, against these teams where it's like, the Patriots are still in it. Why is it? Because this team plays hard. It's a Mike Vrabel team, and they do have talent on this roster.
All right, moving on to the AFC North. Biasly, my Baltimore Ravens had one of the best drafts, in my humble opinion, picking up the chalk pick of Georgia safety Malachi Starks in the first round. Then they took a flyer on the controversial edge, that is Mike Green in the second round, and a potential Justin Tucker replacement, Tyler Loop, in the sixth round there. You as jazzed about this group as I am?
I mean, this is the Ravens and vintage Ravens. Let the draft fall to you. There are just endless examples of them doing this. A few years ago, Kyle Hamilton drops to us. We will gladly take him. Tyler Linderbaum drops to us. We will gladly take them. All pro bowlers. The NFL doesn't want them. We will take them. And again, it happens again. Malachi Starks, very, very versatile. A player that this is a team just last year in Baltimore that allowed a lot of big plays. And now you put Starks with Kyle Hamilton on the back end. Remember, this is also a team that loves having players who could be used as chess pieces. Like Starks could play in the slot, he could play safety. You can move Hamilton around, you can move both of them around, you could switch them around, confuse offenses. I just love that vantage point of it. Hearing Eric DeCosta in his post-draft press conference talking about just how smart Malachi Starks is and how he's basically a coach as a player. That is exactly what a Baltimore Raven is supposed to be. And then Mike Green, getting him where they did. Listen, Mike Green was off boards, but it's not because there is something pending. Obviously, it's a very, very serious situation that he had a few years ago, but it's the reason he was off board is because some teams were like, this guy has had so much over the course of his young life already that we are worried that it could happen again. There's nothing pending. There were no charges. There were no arrests. None of that over here. But obviously, there were some very, very serious stuff of sexual assault that were out there that obviously teams were like, listen, it's happened twice before. We just don't want this anymore. Baltimore, every team has a security department. They went through all of it. They were okay with it and bring him into their building and their culture that he is going to be somebody who will be fine. Green led the FBS last year in sacks. He worked really hard also at becoming a better run defender. For the Ravens as a team, they had two players last year of double-digit sacks with Odafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy. Both those guys are in contract years. Also, David Ajabo, also in the contract years. So Mike Green is a perfect player for them. You mentioned the kicker as well, Tyler Loop out of Arizona in the sixth round. I think this is the Justin Tucker replacement. I'll be upfront with you. I don't think Justin Tucker is there anymore. I think his time is coming to an end in Baltimore. And it's not just because of the allegations, which are very disturbing, that are out there about him. He just didn't have a good year last year, and he has no guaranteed money left. So they're going to probably designate him as a post June 1 cut at some point. I know the investigation with the NFL is ongoing, but I just get the feeling you don't use a 6th-round pick on a kicker right now over here if you're just going to cut him after the preseason is over. So my assumption over here is that the Tucker era, who's been there since 2012, undrafted, won a Super Bowl, multiple 8-9-time All-Pro, best field goal potential of any kicker in NFL history. I think his time is likely coming to an end in Baltimore. They just drafted his replacement as well. But overall, Baltimore did what Baltimore does. They let the draft come to them, and I'm not surprised at all.
On to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They still don't have their quarterback one, and in the draft, they did not select one. Although they did take Will Howard. They took Will Howard later in the draft, Ohio State. He's a champion. He's there in the 6th round. But they seemingly are still waiting for Aaron Rodgers to like get out of a bunker in Montana or something and decide whether he wants to play. They did ultimately take a pretty good player in the 1st round, though, Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon. I'm pretty fond of him. I think he's a good pick. What do you think about their overall draft?
Yeah, I'm a bit interested about the Harmon pick because, first of all, I love the Steelers draft. I mean, Harmon, Caleb Johnson, the running back. Some people, including I believe Sam Monson, had him higher than some of the Ohio State running backs over here. Jack Sawyer, the pass rusher out of Ohio State, was surprised to see him go in day 3. I thought he was a surefire day 2 pick as well. So I liked especially the early on of this draft, and it's once again addressing what the Steelers do. It's defense, defense, defense. Like everyone was saying, Shador, maybe Jackson Dart, maybe Jalen Milrow. They were like, nah. We'll take Derek Harmon, who I was surprised they took him there, not because he's not a great player, but some teams did not want to take him in the 1st round because he had 3 different injury situations with a shoulder, a hip, and something else, if I remember off the top of my mind. He also had a really, really difficult personal situation going on with his mother, who was on life support, who it's a great story now just to hear about it, but she passed away after her son told her that he was getting drafted by the Steelers. But during that entire end of the draft process, he had to cancel a bunch of meetings, which were important because of people wanted to check out his medicals and see him with their own doctors. He couldn't do it. He had to be by her side. But the Steelers were comfortable with all of it, the medicals and all of that. They bring him in. He's a classic Steelers player. And what he did at Oregon last year, he really flourished his entire game by going there last year. And this is a player who, look at Cam Hayward. He's up there in age. I mean, it's what he's done up until now has been tremendous, but he's in the back 9. So this is someone who's going to replace him eventually. I just get the sense right now that the Steelers not addressing quarterback in round 1 at pick 83 when Shador was still there, when Jalen Milrow was still there. This tells me that they know something about Aaron Rodgers, because Rodgers said throughout on the McAfee show that he has had many conversations with Mike Tomlin and they're staying in communication. If they passed it in a 21, they passed again 83 and they were still there, it has to be that he knows something that he's coming there. So I would imagine that's the case. And whenever Aaron is ready, we will all find out together.
Cincinnati Bengals had a banged up, pretty rough defense there this past season. I think that's putting it mildly. They decided to go high risk, high reward with Shamar Stewart with the 17th pick in the draft out of Texas A&M. Don't get me wrong, highly regarded for his potential, but has only recorded a sack and a half in each of his 3 seasons there in college. The Bengals ultimately went defense with 3 of their first 6 picks. I was a little surprised it wasn't even higher than that. Do you think that they did enough to restock this defense for the upcoming season?
I mean, forget about the draft for a second. The biggest question with the Bengals is about Trey Hendrickson. If he's there, I mean, then these pieces coming together with them, it's going to be better. I mean, looking at a player like Shamar Stewart, they took him at 17. There were other pass rushers out there, pass rushers who, like we said, had some issues out there, whether it was off the field or character or whatever. They were like, no, we're going to take this traits guy and Shamar Stewart. You mentioned it. The most sacks in the year was 1.5 for this guy, but it's all about traits. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of a guy who went number 1 overall a few years ago in Trayvon Walker, who was all about traits. It was traits. And that was the word we kept on hearing from Trent Baalke. And now the last couple of years, Trayvon Walker has recorded over 20 sacks in the last 2 years. He's finally put it together. So you look at a guy like Shamar Stewart, when it comes to pressure rate, when it comes to all those metrics that analytics people use, he is an analytics darling because he is somebody who is very disruptive. The problem is finishing. You know who does finish? His name is Trey Hendrickson. He has had 17 and a half sacks each of the last 2 years, led the NFL in sacks last year. So if you put those two guys together, I get the vision here for Cincinnati where it's like Shamar will be disruptive. He's going to be the guy who's getting to the quarterback, and Trey's going to be the guy finishing. But it's more about making sure you have Trey Hendrickson, who we know is very, very upset right now in Cincinnati. So I like that pick for them. It's somebody who I think is going to grow as the years go on. Their second round pick, also a guy like Demetrius Knight, who their new defensive coordinator Al Golden really liked. He had a post draft press conference, talked a little bit about him as well, how versatile he is, how he can really do off ball or go off the edge as well. They really liked him a lot. I thought they took him a little bit early, but this is somebody who they really coveted. I was surprised that throughout the entire draft, Golden did not draft a single Notre Dame player at all. I mean, that's interesting to me. So there were a bunch of guys over here that he liked over here that were not Notre Dame guys. So obviously addressing defense made a lot of sense. Also, the other pick of year, third round pick 81, Dylan Fairchild, the guard out of Georgia. They need at the interior of the offensive line somebody. And I don't know if that guy's going to be a starter this year in front of Joe Burrow. There are still guys out there like a Brandon Scherf who's available, but at least you're bringing in a young guy over here into rookie training camp, into OTAs and training camp, and maybe he becomes a guy who could start for you. If not, they still have to address the interior of the offensive line as well over here in the coming weeks and months.
Ooh, baby. I'm excited for this next team. I've been waiting, Ari. Cleveland Browns. It's a fun one. They had the second pick in the draft. They decided they did not want to have Travis Hunter. They would prefer to trade the pick to the Jaguars for a slew of options. And one of those picks that they got back was the fifth pick in the draft, in which they used to take Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham. They skipped on a quarterback in the second round, which I think a lot of people said, maybe this is the time they take Shedeur. Nope. They decided to go with Carson Schlesinger out of UCLA and Ohio State running back Quinshon Judkins. And then in the third round, they went Harold Fannin, the tight end out of Bowling Green. And then they decided, you know what? We are going to take quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, with the 94th pick. And then we all know what happened there on day 3. They actually technically went back-to-back quarterbacks in the draft, with Shedeur Sanders joining the other 4 quarterbacks already on the roster there in the 5th round. I have a lot of thoughts on what Cleveland did. They don't super matter. I'm very curious to hear what you think they did, and did it start properly with trading that pick?
There are different ways to look at the Browns. I think, first of all, with Cleveland, I think this is them also just acknowledging and kind of conceding that we are not a few players away. I mean, them trading away the number 2 overall pick and the rights to draft a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter is them just admitting, like, listen, this one player is not taking us to the playoffs next year. It's just not. And I think that is all goes back to and traces back to the Deshaun Watson trade and the contract that they gave him. 3 first-round picks, $230 million fully guaranteed. I looked it up today. They still owe him $46 million this year in cash, $46 million in cash next year, and over $150 million. I've been saying 130, $150 million in cap dollars that have not hit their salary cap yet over here. So they realize, looking at the big picture, that we need a lot of help over here, and getting one player does not do the job. Trading back, getting an extra first-round pick, that helps them keep on getting cheap talent over here in the future. They got a bunch of other picks as well from Jacksonville. So I get that philosophy. I don't get why they brought back so many veteran guys throughout the course of the offseason, including the big one in Myles Garrett, who demanded a trade. They probably could have gotten 2+ first-round picks for him and just hit the reset button and just do everything, move down for number 2, reset everything, have like 4 or 5 first-round picks, reset like that. They're doing like a half reset over here, which is interesting. And we'll see how it goes. Just looking at the picks over here, Mason Graham, I mentioned this on the show last week. In terms of upside and potential, if all goes well, people in the NFL actually liked Walter Nolan more than Mason Graham. But now you plug him in over here in the middle of the defense. He is somebody who is a safe player, a reliable player. Again, analytics people just did not like him. I heard there was a thing with his weight also, which some teams were concerned about. There are a lot of different things over here with him, but Cleveland was good with it. They took him. The entire draft for them just felt a little bit wacky. Like it felt like at points it was like, oh, that's a good value pick, and then it was like, what the heck is going on over here? And there were so many moments of that in this draft. Like Judkins is a really really good player. I did not have him going ahead of Henderson, for example. Schlesinger, I think that was a really good pick. He's somebody who was making plays all over the field at UCLA. It felt like every single time the defense made a play, it was kind of him. There was a little bit about him where he sometimes, I don't want to say got lost a little bit, but there were moments when it comes to his play where you heard, I guess because he was so involved, that part of it, that's why he was not a first round pick. But this linebacker class was not very deep. And they also have an issue as well with Jeremiah Wusu, who his future is in doubt right now with the injuries that he's had over the last couple of years. No real clarity there, so he could be the replacement for them. But just going at Harold Finning Jr., this is somebody who put up numbers at Bowling Green, FBS record with 117 catches and 1,555 yards last year. So David Njoku, final year of his contract, that could be the eventual replacement. Obviously, what everyone is waiting for over here is the quarterbacks. I just don't get the process of taking Dylan Gabriel in the third round and then coming back in the fifth round taking Shador. I guess you could just say that, hey, we did not expect Shador to still be there, so we took him. Everyone in the NFL, for what it's worth, believes that was an upstairs call, like, hey, just take him right now. And obviously, you can say body language, you can say whatever it is. But for Shador, I don't think there was a better spot he could have ended up than Cleveland, because right now, all you're looking at, it's Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and Shador Sanders out there. And I think there's a scenario here where he starts games for them at some point this year. I mean, there's no way you actually think Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco or Dylan Gabriel are starting 17 games for the Browns. There's no chance. So I think Shador actually has a shot of starting this year. But this is a team that just their draft felt like it was all over the place a little bit, and it felt a little bit wonky. But this is a team that just doesn't know where they are. Are they in contend mode? Are they in restart mode? And the draft kind of reflects that, where they're trading down and getting more picks, but they brought back Myles Garrett. I'm just confused about where they are as an organization, but the Deshaun Watson thing just looms around them right now. And I think they kind of conceded that just getting one player does not do the job of here, and that was part of the process.
Also adding, not a draft related thing, but Deontay Johnson is going to the Cleveland Browns as if they needed more
I mean,
craziness in that locker room.
I need the Browns and Hard Knocks. I mean, I just do. A
Yeah.
lot of interesting characters there in Cleveland going into this year.
Okay. Let's talk about one of the teams that actually traded out of the first round. You know, we all were talking about the fact that all the teams have their picks. They decided, you know what? We're going to move back. They might have needed an offensive lineman, but who cares? The Houston Texans traded out that pick that we're talking about to the New York Giants so they could take Jackson Dart 25th overall. They later then doubled up on Iowa State receivers with Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel in the second and third round. And in between that, they sandwiched in Minnesota offensive lineman Ariante Ursary, which is pretty good pick, it seems like. Ultimately, though, are you surprised they decided to get rid of that first round pick, not taking an offensive lineman, which there were seemingly a few guys there at 25, and then ultimately go kind of receiver heavy with the two of the top three picks?
Yeah, I was a bit surprised that the receiver heavy, just because it feels like the Houston Texans have a bunch of receivers out there. Obviously, Nico is there. They traded for Christian Kirk. Tank Dell is gonna miss a large portion of the season, so you can't really count him here. But they do like Xavier Hutchinson, and then taking Jaden Higgins, who again I said for weeks over here, I thought there was a potential shot of him going in the first round. He ends up going at 34. Just a big body receiver who moves really well for his size, reliable hand. I kind of like him. And the comp for him was Nico Collins. So it's kind of funny that they're teammates now. I actually applaud them for trading out of the first round because they clearly did not like any of the offensive linemen that were available. And then trading down and at 48, taking Ursary from Minnesota. That is somebody who could be a potential starting left tackle in the NFL. He's another person who there were, I hate using the word character, but there were some little bit concerns with him as well. But bringing him into Houston, he is somebody who they believe if you bring him in the right environment, he could be okay over here. So I kind of like the process that they took over here. We mentioned it a couple of days ago on the Thursday night, the live episode that we did. I do think if the Texans knew the Falcons offer was on the table, they would have just done that trade. which of course was the future first round pick. They ended up doing the Giants trade. I still have not gotten an answer from people in Houston if they knew that thing was out there, or if that was just a done deal that was already done with the Rams. I find that to be very interesting, but I kind of did like their process over here of how they handled all of it, because we all knew they wanted an offensive lineman. They were trying to trade up in night one of the draft. They could not get the right value to move up. I would imagine that was for one of the offensive linemen. I did hear a lot about them with Kelvin Banks, who of course went number 9. They didn't like what was there. They traded down, but this is a team still that is really going through a complete revamp of the offensive line, what they did this offseason, moving on from Larry Tunsil and Shaq Mason and Kenyon Green. Now you bring in Cam Robinson and Trent Brown, and of course you draft Ursary as well. This is a team that really wants to reset that culture on the offensive line. They have a new offensive coordinator as well coming over from the Rams. So a lot of moving parts over here with the offense, but I kind of like the process that they took over here in this draft.
You can say what you want about Chris Ballard, but I think he got exactly what he wanted with the 14th pick in this past draft. Tyler Warren was there. I don't think a lot of people thought that he would be there at 14. I don't think a lot of people thought he would be the second tight end off the board, thanks to the Chicago Bears skipping on Warren and taking Colson Loveland out of Michigan. But they got him. They got their tight end that they've been seemingly looking for. They also got a friend of the show, DJ Giddens, there out of K-State in the 5th round. Overall win for the Colts, right?
Yeah, this is a team that is very, very character heavy as well. Like they only want to draft guys who are fit the culture, good guys, and look throughout this entire draft. I mean, you mentioned we had Giddens on the show, Tyler Ward as well, somebody who was an exceptionally good guy as well. So they love drafting those type of players on top of the talent that they are. That's what they did again. And it was the dream scenario for the Colts. I mean, they targeted Warren for months. Warren only took one 30 visit this entire process because he was literally probably the cleanest prospect in this entire draft. The only visit he took was with the Colts. They brought him in, and they kind of felt like the only way we were getting him was trading up. And they did have a couple of trade calls that were made. I believe they called the Saints at number 9. Saints were like, no, we're sticking here and just picking because Mickey Loomis never trades down. And then the Bears came on the clock. They took Loveland, and it was like, oh, wow, we might have a shot over here. And of course, stayed patient. He fell to them. And 104 catches last year, over 1,000 yards, literally plays all over the formation. He will just make life easier for whether it's Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. And look at the entire team now with Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, the weapons that they have with Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell. Like there are guys on this roster, adding Warren as well with Shane Steichen calling the plays. This is a team that at least has the players there. It all comes down to the quarterback here. And of course, it's going to be a true competition there upcoming here in August once we get to training camp. And whoever ends up being the quarterback, there's some pretty good weapons there in Indianapolis. So a dream scenario for them. Love really all the picks that they made over here throughout the draft. I mean, looking in the second round, again, another guy who I cannot pronounce his last name, but the edge out of Ohio State, a player who is Chris Ballard has been enamored with players from Ohio State, and that's something that he's done a little bit over the years. Another player over there they take in the second round. So kind of like what they did over here in the draft, and it's a do or die year for Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, I would say. So they need some production, and I think this is a draft that fell for them kind of perfectly.
Just call him JT. That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
Just call him JT. All right.
I need an AI pronunciation of my voice whenever we have those situations.
Yeah, exactly. We'll dub it over later. Like you said yesterday, James Gladstone, he got some stones. He took the unicorn and Travis Hunter out of Colorado, giving up future first and more stuff to be able to move from the 5th pick to the 2nd pick. They had 8 other picks in the draft, but really nothing else, I think, came close to mattering as much as what they did there with that 2nd pick, getting an offensive superstar, defensive superstar, all packaged into one. He can be very much, I know they have Trevor Lawrence, but he can be the face of a franchise, I truly believe. What did you think of the move that they made, the compensation they gave to be able to do so, and then ultimately the player that they are getting?
Yeah, so this was their only pick in the first 87 picks of the draft was Travis Hunter. I mean, we mentioned it yesterday. It's just a new era of Jaguars philosophy when it comes to the draft with James Gladstone, where it's like we're okay with trading our high picks in order to get a player that we want. Similar to how the Rams did it when they were actually trading for veterans. This is actually trading for a rookie, which the Rams, I think, only did with Jared Goff when it came to trading big time picks like they did when they traded up for Jared Goff back in 2016. The rest of their trades were all veterans like Stafford and Jalen Ramsey and Von Miller and all those different players. But Travis Hunter is a generational player. We've never seen someone like this in the NFL. They targeted him. They offered enough for Cleveland to do it. And for me, he's going to be used primarily in the offensive side in the beginning. They'll sprinkle him in on the defense eventually as well. But for me, I look at the rest of the picks that they made over here in this draft. We mentioned it yesterday. James Gladstone comes from the Rams. They've had a lot of success in rounds 3 through 7. And a big part of that was James Gladstone. Before James Gladstone, Brad Holmes was there, who's now the GM of Detroit. Like, that front office has really produced some really, really good scouts over the years, and they have an eye for a talent throughout the draft. So when you look at the Jaguars draft from picks 3 to 7, yeah, it's a bunch of guys that maybe the average fans have never heard of. But once we get to September, October, November, December, if those guys are making plays, it's because Gladstone and his staff, a lot of guys that he brought over, and he will be bringing more over here in the coming weeks as he sets up his own front office for the next calendar cycle. These are guys who he knows how to scout, and that's why he's comfortable moving on from picks in rounds 1 and rounds 2, like he did with that big trade with the Cleveland Browns. I mentioned this yesterday also. It would not surprise me if he makes more trades here in the coming months, especially if they're actually winning come September, October, November before the trade deadline, because he is perfectly fine with moving on with those picks to get proven commodities because he believes in the scouting department nailing those late round picks. And look at it right now. I didn't realize this. The Jaguars right now are projected to have at least 10 draft picks next year, could be as many as 12 when it comes to just there were some trades that they made where the conditions were not sure if they apply yet or not. So they could have as many as 12, 13 picks next year, which is for Gladstone, that is a lot. He's willing to do trades. So it's a new era in Jacksonville, and I kind of like what they're doing there. And Travis Hunter is going to be one of those must-watch players to see how he actually does on both sides of the ball here in 2025.
No funny business for the Tennessee Titans. They took the best quarterback in the draft with Cam Ward with the first overall pick. They went defense with their next 2 picks, and then they took a receiver a little bit later on with Chimray DK with the first pick of the 3rd round out of Wisconsin. They did what they had to do to kick things off for the future of what's going on there in Tennessee. Cam Ward, obviously, we have talked decent amount about. I still don't think he's gotten enough attention on the national scale, but what do you make of the rest of their haul?
Yeah, I mean, this was a draft where for the Titans, I mean, entering this offseason, probably the weakest roster in the NFL. You can make an argument for that. Like a lot of overpriced veterans who are not producing. They needed a quarterback. They were not sure if they would be able to find it here in this draft. And of course, they found somebody who they fell in love with, who every single team had as QB1, I would say, in this draft. Maybe would not have been QB1 in different drafts, but this year he was. And they believe it's somebody who could compete with the, Joe Burrows and the Patrick Mahomes and the Josh Allens and the Lamar Jackson and Justin Herberts and CJ Strouds and all the talented quarterbacks that are in the AFC. You don't make this pick at number 1 if you don't think he could compete with all those quarterbacks that are in the AFC right now. I mean, even guys who have not yet made it yet, like a Drake May or a Trevor Lawrence, like those guys are lurking as well potentially. So if you're picking a guy, you're not looking to get a guy who's middle of the pack. If you're using number 1 overall pick on a quarterback, you better believe he's that type of a caliber guy could get you there. And they believe Cam Ward is there. As for the rest of the draft, they had to go best player available across throughout this entire draft. And that's basically what they did over here. I mean, Mike Borgonzi, their new GM, even the rest of the front office who they hired this offseason with Dave Ziegler, Reggie McKenzie, the president, Chad Brinker. Those are all guys who are very, very well-respected scouts throughout the NFL for many, many years. And the way they went into this draft was, we're just taking best player available. We're not going to be like, oh, we have Cam Ward, now we must take a receiver in round 2 and pair him up. Like, they were trading down in round 2. Like, we got to get more picks over here. We got to get more picks over here to get more players and try to really bolster this roster. So that's what they did. I kind of like their 4th-round pick of Gunnar Helm, the tight end out of Texas. He is somebody who I think is a true pass catcher. I think he's somebody who could become, with Chick Okonkwo, their tight end on the roster right now, somebody there who could pair up with him. Okonkwo's in the final year of his contract going into this year. So that's the situation over there where a player who could contribute in his rookie year with Cam Ward and eventually become the starting tight end in the future as well. But overall, this is a roster that needs a lot of help, and they kind of addressed that throughout this draft, and also an undrafted free agency as well. There's going to be a lot of guys, a lot of rookies and undrafted guys who end up making the 53-man roster in Tennessee once we get there in August.
Well, the Kansas City Chiefs got their draft started by moving back one pick with the Eagles so the Eagles could take their linebacker they wanted in Jahad Campbell out of Alabama, which I imagine was just a move to try to stop the other teams from potentially trading with Kansas City to do just that. They ended up taking offensive lineman Josh Simmons out of Ohio State with that 32nd pick. They went with Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee in the 2nd round, and then they got a new toy for Mahomes a little bit later on with Jalen Royals out of Utah State in the 4th round. I'm sure he was happy to see another target coming in there that I know a lot of people actually did have higher on boards than maybe some of the consensus. One of our guys, like we've mentioned before, Sam Monson, was super high on him. What was your thoughts on the Kansas City draft class?
Yeah, Jalen Morales, first of all, just their pick over there in the 4th round. No receiver in college football had more receptions of 50-plus yards than Jalen Royals. With a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, that sounds like money over here going into this year. But love their 1st-round pick, Josh Simmons, who kind of just fell to them there at number 32. Like you mentioned, they traded down one pick. Simmons without the injury, he's probably a top 10 pick in this draft. Now, he's still recovering from the injury. Some teams had the medical recheck in Indianapolis, which happens a few weeks before the draft. Some teams were okay with it. Some teams were not. Those torn patellar tendons it's a difficult injury. It's especially difficult for an offensive lineman. So it depends how you felt about it. Clearly, the Chiefs were okay with it. They're going into this year of Jalen Moore right now at left tackle. You could play Simmons at guard as well if you want to start. It's not an ideal situation, but if you want to put him on the field, you could. They're not planning on doing that. They're planning on having their 2nd-round pick out of BYU doing that. Kingsley Suamamita, again, I cannot pronounce his name. I've had this trouble for a number of months now. I'm not even trying to fix it, but yeah, that's the plan right now. They're at left guard for them, but the point is right now that Josh Simmons could be their potential future left tackle over here in Kansas City moving forward. So love that pick. Love Royale. Also Noah Williams, the cornerback at number 85 out of California. This is somebody who really, you look at the quarterback room right now in Kansas City after Trent McDuffie, there are kind of questions about where it is in the future. I know there's a guy like Jalen Watson there who came back from an injury last year, but you really need somebody else there. And this is somebody who could kind of play inside and out over there for them if they want to put him on the field as early as this year. I think he could be definitely a guy for them for Steve Spagnuolo's defense, the cornerback out of California.
California. It's nice to hear someone say that instead of Cal. That's a fun one. Yeah. California. All right. Sticking in California, Los Angeles Chargers. I'm sure Harbaugh wanted to just take all Michigan guys, in particular with that 1st rounder, but they opted to go with Marion Hampton out of UNC with the 26th or 22nd pick, running back, by the way. Then they went and added wide receiver Trey Harris out of Ole Miss with their 2nd-round pick. And then they added another receiver and a tight end later on. I was a little bit surprised that they went as heavy with offense with some of those picks, particularly at the top there with Hampton and Harris. What are your thoughts on their approach?
One interesting note about the Chargers, when they were on the clock at number 22, they were trying to trade with the Philadelphia Eagles, who were trying to come up for Jahad Campbell. They thought they had a deal in place, and for whatever reason, something went wrong. Like, Jahad Campbell actually got the call from the Eagles at number 22 that they traded up. The trade never actually went through, which was an interesting part out of all of this. So I'm not saying Omarion Hampton was it wasn't a panic pick, but I think they kind of took him earlier than they were expecting there because they were planning to slide down 10 spots, and for whatever reason it did not happen. But Omarion Hampton, we've spoken a lot about Hampton here on the show. We mentioned how he'll be a 1st-round pick about a month ago here on the show. What he did last year with no Drake May, with no real weapons around him at UNC, and just being awesome in the run game and in the pass game, and really no one talking about him much because we all love the Ashton Genty storyline, the Ohio State running backs, what Cam Scadaboo was doing there at Arizona, down the line over there in the playoffs, like Arizona State, like all of that going on. That no one talked really much about Hampton because UNC was just not really a good football team. But bringing him in, we know the way Jim Harbaugh football works, wherever it is, whether it was at San Francisco, whether it was at Michigan, whether it's at Stanford, running the ball, being a run first team, Greg Roman, we know how it is. Their new running back room now moving forward is Hampton and, of course, Najee Harris, who they signed this offseason. They're still going to be a run heavy team, and they're now going to rely on Justin Herbert just being awesome as well, but having a run first team, which we saw some of it last year, but they still finished, I believe it was 15th or 17th in running last year. So you bring in both those guys, I think they will be much, much better with the offense line they have in front of them. It should be a very, very fun offense here this year. I was not that surprised that they addressed the receiver room as heavy as they did. Trey Harris, pick number 55 out of Ole Miss, and of course also addressing receiver later on in the 5th round in this draft with Keandre Lambert-Smith out of Auburn. This is a team that last year it was literally Ladd McConkey and a bunch of guys. Quentin Johnson had a bunch of touchdowns, but he had a billion drops as well. They need some other guys as well. They signed Mike Williams, 1 year, $3 million deal. He's not a long-term solution. So not surprised. Trey Harris is somebody who could go up and get the ball. They clearly liked him a lot. I thought the Giants might have taken him if he would have slipped a little bit more because former teammate of Jackson Dart and somebody who also knows Malik Neighbors a little bit. So I thought there was a chance they would take him if he slipped, but Chargers took him at 55, ended his slide. I like what they did a lot over there here in this draft. And this offense, which felt like it was missing some juice last year, it definitely got the juice here in this draft.
Well, the team that I think a lot of people penciled Omarion Hampton to was the Denver Broncos. That's not where they went with the 20th pick. They decided to take Jahdae Barron out of Texas, just ever more adding to that defense, which is going to be pretty damn stacked next year. He'll be playing cornerback out there with Pat Surtain. They also went with a running back out of some school in Florida, as you might say, RJ Harvey. They also took a punter, so that's fun. Love to see punters get drafted, Jeremy Crashaw. This defense is going to be fun. I'm excited to watch it. What do you think?
Yeah, we spoke about it yesterday. I mean, Jahdae Barron, who I thought would be a top 15 pick, I put him in there for the Miami Dolphins. They passed on him. This defense is just absurd. It just is. I mean, throughout all 3 levels. I mean, in the secondary now, you go into the year of Patrick Surtain, the defensive player of the year. You add Jahdae Barron as well. You have Riley Moss there, the other cornerback as well, who you could insert into the lineup as well. Brandon Jones at safety, Tolana Hufanga, who they signed at safety, Alex Singleton at linebacker, Dre Greenlaw, who they signed this offseason at linebacker, and then the defensive line with Zach Allen, DJ Jones, Nick Bonito, and John Franklin Myers. I mean, this defense is nasty. With Van Joseph calling the plays, unbelievable defense. And even RJ Harvey, the running back who they took in number 60, we all thought Hampton, we all thought Henderson. They could have traded back up for Henderson maybe in the 2nd round. They were okay with RJ Harvey, and Sean Payton really did extensive work on all the running backs in this draft. His post-draft press conference, he mentioned how much they liked RJ Harvey. If we're not getting one of the top guys, then next tier, RJ Harvey's my guy, and we are keeping that quiet. And they did just that. This is somebody who actually led all of college football last year with over 23% of his carries going for 10 plus yards. So explosive back, could also catch the ball out of the backfield. So we're not surprised. I mean, think about a running back that Sean Payton once took in the 3rd round in Alvin Kamara. He knew a lot about him. Other teams did not. And of course, Alvin became something great. I'm not saying that RV will become Alvin Kamara, but I would not doubt Sean Payton when it comes to running backs. He has a really good eye for that position. So I would not surprise me at all if Harvey has a big role for this team going into 2025.
Apologies to Jahdae Barron. Forgot they pronounce it with a Z. It's about how you do it. So they already asked Sean Payton how he says it. He's just like, I'm going to call him JB, which is smart. You know, that works. Let's finish off the AFC because we are running long right now. We're moving. We're running long. Las Vegas Raiders. Are you surprised they went Ashton Genty there with the 6th pick when they had all the other options you thought they were going to go? They also took Jack Besh, took a receiver a little bit later on. They also took William Mary, offensive lineman Charles Grant, who I also like. What do you think of their picks?
Yeah. So was I surprised about Genty? Yes, I was. I think everyone who listens to this show knows that. I thought they were going to pass on a running back, get one later, deep running back class. They could have addressed The offensive line is good. You could have made it better and better long term as well by taking one of the tackles with Colton Miller getting up there in age. But they go with the best running back hands down in this draft. And I said it yesterday on the show. This could be a sneaky fun offense with Geno, Genti, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, and of course the offensive line group, which again, it's not a bad group. It's a decent group out there up front with the offensive line, especially with the two rookies who they drafted last year who started most of the season. This is a good offensive line. Chip Kelly calling the plays. It should be fun. We heard a lot about Pete Carroll saying this is not a rebuild year. No, 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 it's not. We're going to win this year, and we're going to add all these pieces to try to help us over here this year. So I'm with them on that. I've mentioned their GM's name a lot over here on the show. I have a lot of respect for John Spytek and his staff that he has in Las Vegas. Tampa Bay, where he came from, has been one of the better drafting teams in the NFL. Spytek deserves a lot of credit for that. He has brought that over here to Las Vegas. Look at all the picks they made over here in this draft. Jack Bech, the wide receiver out of TCU, will not surprise me if he has an impact right away for this team. He had an amazing Senior Bowl, has a really good story. I retweeted a story from Greg Allman on my timeline. Go check it out. It's a really emotional one, but he's somebody who I think could be on the field right away. But when it comes to John Spytek and his eye for talent, I think he's one of the better evaluators in the NFL, and that goes along with his staff. So these guys who they drafted over here, look at Tampa Bay's history. They've always found players wherever it is in the draft. They also signed 15 players as undrafted free agents. Would not surprise me if a couple of the guys do make the roster as well. When it came to homegrown players, no team in the NFL had more homegrown players on their roster than the Buccaneers last year. Spytek deserves a lot of that credit, and he's now going to bring that over here to Las Vegas. So this is a draft. Look through all the names. I would not surprise me at all if some of these guys are making an impact right away in year one for Las Vegas. And when Pete Carroll says he wants to compete right away, he really means it. And they're going to have these guys making an impact early on here in 2025.
Halfway mark. Moving over to the NFC with the Eagles kicking things off. We've already mentioned how they moved up one slot to take Alabama linebacker Jahad Campbell. We heard about what they were thinking about doing with moving up with other teams to be able to get him. They obviously were adding to a very stacked defense as well. Andrew Mabuka out of Texas with somebody else, or Makuba out of Texas with the last pick of the second round. Kyle McCord came in later. He's the Syracuse quarterback with a 6th rounder. They lost a lot of talent with guys like Milton Williams, Mekhi Becton. Presumably, we're not going to be seeing a return of Brandon Graham within that 5% realm. How much did these picks help fill the gaps, particularly there on the defense?
So Jahad Campbell, clearly they loved him a lot. Like we said, they were trying to trade up for him. And if you hear the phone call of Jahad, Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, literally says, we've been trying to trade up for you for over an hour. Thank God we're able to get you here at 31. But this is a team that, because they've built the roster the way they did, they have the ability to take some of these players that some other teams would not be able to. Like Campbell, really good player, silent to sideline linebacker, best linebacker in this draft. At the same time, there was a medical thing with him when it came to his knees and his shoulders and all these different things. The Eagles are like, listen, if the medical checks out, and like they've done this before, like a Landon Dickerson who had a knee injury as well coming in, if that checks out, we're going to be in a really good spot. And where their roster is, they are able to do that and take that risk. It's a credit to Howie Roseman and the roster that they've built where it's just this good and they're able to do that. Their second round pick, Andrew Makuba, the safety out of Texas, that is essentially going to be the replacement for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who they traded over to Houston. This is how they roll. Like they're always getting these picks, drafting players, even taking 3 offensive linemen in this draft. Drew Kendall in the 5th round, Miles Hinton in the 6th round, Cameron Williams in the 6th round as well. If they just hit on one of those guys, that guy's going to become a 10-year starter with Jeff Stoutland. I mean, no one's going to go 3 for 3 with offensive linemen in that part of the draft. Eagles are going to hit on one of them. You could probably write it down right now that they will. If Jeff Stoutland as the offensive line coach, they will. So this is how the Eagles do it, and they always restock. And they're going to once again have a bunch of picks next year because they're going to get 4 compensatory picks coming their way for all the free agents they lost this past offseason in free agency from Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and Mekhi Becton and on and on. So they're always going to have these draft picks, and they're going to take some risks and they keep on addressing the trenches. This is how they do it, and there's a reason why year in and year out for the last 3-4 years, they've had the best and deepest roster in the NFL.
All right, we are moving on to the Washington Commanders. Left hand up, they added some protection for Jaden Daniels with Josh Connerly of Oregon coming in to strengthen the offensive line with the 29th pick. Cornerback Trey Amos from Ole Miss in the second round. Feels like pretty good value. And they took a flyer on a guy that I think is pretty interesting. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt didn't play a lot of college football due to a lot of eligibility issues. He was the Shrine Bowl MVP, 245th selection. Like, why not? New stadium on the way for the Commanders. Pretty good weekend in the DMV.
Yeah, I mean, this was not a super deep draft over here. Only 5 players drafted by the Washington Commanders. Of course, they've traded away picks for Debo Samuel and Marshawn Lattimore and Laramie Tunsil. So not surprising, but just the first 2 picks. Josh Connerly Jr., we mentioned on the show, somebody who some people had as a second round pick. We mentioned him go in the first round. I don't think their goal was to go out there and get an offensive lineman in the first round. I don't think they thought Connerly would be there. This was Adam Peters, their GM, showed Cliff Kingsbury came into his office, wrote on a paper, Josh Connerly Jr. is my guy. He did what his coaches wanted. Clearly, somebody who they saw on tape who could be a future left tackle in the NFL. Larry Tunsil is great. He's also getting up there in age, and he also needs a new contract, which to this point, nothing has happened yet on that end. So Connerly could be your guy. You could flip him over to right tackle as well, which is more of a question mark in Washington in the future. Andrew Wiley's in the final year of his contract. Brandon Coleman right now, they've had him at left tackle. He won't be a left tackle. Will he make that transition to right tackle? They have Sam Cosmi, the right guard, who is recovering from a late season ACL injury. So there are options over here with Josh Connerly and how to use them. And then Trey Amos, the second round pick, I had him going in the first round. This is somebody who he using the word slip, but he did. But 6'1", 195 pounds, 4.43 speed. He was, I mean, over 15 passes defended last year at Ole Miss. Like, he is somebody who has a knack for the football. I was surprised he was there. He's somebody who is really good in man coverage, could also work in zone coverage. So I like that pick a lot for them. I was shocked that he was there at 61. But for a team that only made 5 picks, this is a pretty good draft for a team that is only ascending and getting better.
All right, how about them Cowboys? They didn't take Matthew Golden, which I'm sure some fans were a little bit disappointed about, but they got a little protection help there with Alabama offensive lineman Tyler Booker. They got a steal with Boston College edge Donovan Ezeraku in the second round. ECU corner Savone Ravel. Yes, Savone, not Siobhan or Siobhan, any of those things. Had to look up another name there. Third round pick out of ECU cornerback. It's pretty solid. Texas running back Jaden Blue, who I know that was somebody you've talked about in the past, fell to them in the 5th round. Again, I don't know if it was like a home run pick with Booker in the first round, but the rest of the class looks like steals to me.
First of all, Tyler Booker is just a safe pick. Like, I know fans were not happy with that, but that's where it starts. Starts in the trenches. They had Zach Martin retire. This is an offensive line now that is filled with former first round picks named Tyler. Tyler Guyton, left tackle, Tyler Smith, left guard, and now you have Tyler Booker at right guard. Imagine they just kept Tyler Biotish at center as well. They'll have 4 of the 5 offensive linemen being named Tyler. Well, with that. But this is a team that now has shored up the offensive line with Guyton, Smith, Cooper Beebe is the center, and then Booker at right guard, Terrence Steele at right tackle. That's where it all starts. And we know how Dak Prescott has been getting injured these last couple of years where he's not fully healthy. Some of it are, the hand injury a couple of years ago was, hit a helmet, fine. But some of these, whether it's the hamstring or whatever it is, you need better protection and all that stuff. So I get where they're coming from. And Booker is one of these safer picks here in the draft. He is somebody who we talked about here on the show before the draft. He's always looking for work. He's a leader. He holds people accountable. Like, he's going to fit right in with the culture there in Dallas and what they're looking for up front. The rest of the draft, I mean, we've mentioned this also before. For all the, garbage and crap that the Cowboys take, they are a really good drafting team. And you look at what they did in the draft. You mentioned some of the guys that they took. Donovan Ezeraku, the edge out of Boston College, some people had going in the bottom of the first round. They get him there at pick number 44. Edge rusher, put him across from Micah Parsons. You lose to Marcus Lawrence. You have your next guy there for the future. Siobhan Ravel Jr., there's an injury problem there. Obviously tore his ACL this past year. He's still recovering, but they've done this before where they take players who are injured, and then they're like, let's let him recover. And when the time comes, he comes back. And we just got a starter over here in the third round at pick number 76. They did it with Jalen Smith. They've done it with other players. They are okay with doing that because they know the talent that they saw on film. And as long as he recovers well, and the Cowboys have one of the best doctors in the country, a doctor, his name is not coming to me, but a guy who many teams use. Once they're okay with the medical there, they're going to be okay with that player. So I like what they did over here in this draft. Jaden Blue is a guy who is just speed, 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 speed. He's like super fast guy, had a little bit of a fumbling issue, but getting him in the 5th round, he is somebody who I think will be on the field over here this year. So overall, there are not many drafts over here that are on paper. You're like, oh, that's an A or A plus. I like the Patriots. I really like the Cowboys as well of what they did. These guys will all make an impact for them in 2025 for me.
Daniel Cooper, is that who we're talking about there? Sure. Okay. All right. Moving on to the New York Giants. We're tired. We're making through. Let's wrap up the NFC East. The New York Giants, they went chalk with the Penn State pick of Abdul Carter, the edge. He won't be wearing Lawrence Taylor's number, by the way, anytime soon. They made a move back into the first round, as we've already spoken about, to be able to take Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart. Guess Brian Dable is strapping his job security to him. Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Tommy DeVito. Good luck, man. They also took Arizona State star running back Cam Scadaboo in the 3rd round to add to their backfield. It's a make or break year for the Giants. You think this draft class will do enough to be able to help save their jobs?
I do like the process they took, because sometimes whenever you're in a situation where it's like, oh man, we have to save our jobs or whatever, maybe you'll panic and take a quarterback at number 3 just to get your guy. They were like, no. We're going to take the safe guy in Abdul Carter, and we're going to come back and get our quarterback later, which they did. Carter on that defensive line with Brian Burns, with Dexter Lawrence, with Kayvon Thibodeau, and also drafting Darius Alexander in the 3rd round, who I thought should go in the 2nd round. Getting him in the 3rd round, he is exactly what you need to complement Dexter Lawrence. This is a defensive line that 3rd and 7 situations, 3rd and long situations, yeah, good luck getting a first down with those guys coming after you. So defensive line is amazing. Jackson Dart, it's all about Brian Daboll here. That was Brian Daboll's guy. They spent a lot of time together on the whiteboard, at the combine, meeting, phone calls, Zooms, FaceTimes, like everything was done over here. He became his guy, and they believe he is the franchise future quarterback. We'll see if he is. I do believe there are people in the front office who like some other quarterbacks. It was a whole thing. At the end of the day, the guy who coaches the quarterback is Brian Daboll. He liked Jackson Dart, and they took him there. Now, the question becomes, when are we going to see him? I would be surprised if we get a full season of Russell Wilson, or after that, Jameis Winston. We're going to see at some point Jackson Dart over here in 2025. And I think it would be right by the Giants organization, and that goes all the way to John Mara, that if you let this coaching staff and this front office draft that quarterback, you got to give them more than a year to try to actually develop this guy. So I would hope that they give the head coach and GM, who probably are on the hot seat right now, at least 2 years to see this entire thing out of here, because this was their guy. Not everyone in the NFL loved Jackson Dart as a 1st-round prospect. They did. So that part of it also, I think, is very important if the Giants want to continue to climb up over here and not have a climb up. They just go right back down because they fired the guys who took this guy. So that part of it also is very important to me.
Good luck. One team we don't need to wish good luck to, because they seem to be able to figure it out every single time, is the Detroit Lions. I mean, I don't necessarily understand some of the picks they make, but that seems to be the case, is that they go out there, they pick the guys they want, and that's what they did. They took Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams. He kind of snuck there into the 1st round. I think he was closer to 42 on the consensus board, something we spoke about yesterday. They also took Georgia offensive lineman Tate Rutledge. He's got a great mullet, so that probably boosted him up a little bit in the 2nd round there. And then they spent 3 3rd-rounders to move up and get the lesser-known Arkansas wide receiver Isaac Tesla with the 70th pick. He was at 170 in the consensus board, so about 100 picks different. On paper, weird draft, but as we both know, Lions have a plan. They like to stick to it. What do you think of it?
We said yesterday, I'm not downing Brad Holmes ever again, and we saw what he did in previous drafts. He's one of the best drafters in the NFL. Another guy who came from the Los Angeles Rams, and that scouting department. But We saw that draft with Jahmyr Gibbs, with Jack Campbell, with second round pick Sam Laporta, and everyone was like, "What are you guys doing?" And then all those guys, of course, become great. And this becomes one of the better rosters in the NFL. So I'm not going to complain about it. Tyreek Williams is an exceptional run defender, has flashes as a pass rusher. Definitely, there's upside for that as well. He was not somebody who many people had as a first round pick. Lions scouting staff saw something. He's going to make an impact this year because they know what they're doing. Tate Ratledge, it would not surprise me, by the way, guard, second round pick. He becomes like a immediate starter for them. Maybe beats out Graham Glasgow or Mahogany there, the other guard over there in Detroit. He's somebody who could be a 10-year starter in the NFL. Like that's how I view a guy like Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. And then, of course, the one we talked about a lot yesterday, Isaac Tesla, the wide receiver out of Arkansas. When you're giving up 3 third-round picks the way they did to move up for a guy who, like we said, on the consensus board was 170, you see something, you know something, you want him. And again, Lions have done this before. They've been a really, really good drafting team. They've been looking for somebody alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams has been a really good player, but a different style of player is who Isaac Tesla basically is. And it would not surprise me if he's making an impact over here in year one, if they were that aggressive to trade him and knowing how well the scouting department is when it comes to finding college players. So a lot of people were like raising eyebrows about the picks and the trades and whatever, but this is a team that knows what they're doing, and they traded up for both Ratledge and Tesla. So there's a reason why they did that. So I'll be keeping a very close eye on both those players over here, all three players really, as we get into OTAs and training camp and all that to see where these guys actually are once it gets real in training camp.
All right, on to the Minnesota Vikings. They didn't come in with many picks, and they didn't leave. They left with not many picks either. They went Ohio State offensive lineman Donovan Jackson with their first-round pick to help keep J.J. McCarthy on his feet this season. Only 4 more picks the rest of the way. Maryland wideout Ty Felton, they went within the 3rd round. I was surprised that they didn't trade down and try to accumulate more picks to try to be able to pick up more guys there in the late rounds. Didn't happen. Are you surprised that didn't happen? Did they try to do it?
I mean, it's interesting because the teams after them with the Texans and the Rams did trade down. So clearly those teams are trying to come up. Minnesota, they were content clearly of just staying there, whether the value was not good enough for them, which doesn't make sense because the value that especially the Rams got was obviously very, very good. But point being over here that they decided to stay there and take Donovan Jackson over here. And this is really has been the emphasis all offseason long. We saw the interior of the offensive line down the stretch last year and how much of a problem it was for Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold did not play well. The offensive line did not help either. And that was a big issue there. And they revamped it over here this offseason. And now going into this year, you go with Christian Darrisaw coming back from injury at left tackle. Donovan Jackson, your first round pick, could slide into left guard. You signed Ryan Kelly to take over for Garrett Bradbury at center. That's an upgrade. Will Fries, that huge 5-year contract, takes over at right guard. Brian O'Neill, one of the better right tackles in football, is there on the right side. Now you've set up J.J. McCarthy where he should not have that issue that Sam Darnold had with the offensive line. So I get why they didn't trade out of this pick. And they were like, listen, if we have somebody who could slide in, be a day one starter, the way Donovan Jackson was Ohio State, where he played both guard and tackle, was kind of the unsung hero last year when Josh Simmons went out. He can kind of do both for you, but his natural position has been guard, even though for what it's worth on tape, he did kind of look better at left tackle, but he has that versatility. But you're getting that starter in the first round. We're not going to trade down. We want to make sure our young franchise quarterback, who has not taken an NFL snap yet, has protection in front of him. So I'm okay with what they did. The offensive line is now fortified, and we know the rest of the offense and how good it is and could be with Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason coming in as well with the running game. This is a team that really has set up J.J. McCarthy for success with, of course, Kevin O'Connell calling the play. So I'm okay with them not trading down if that was the plan that they wanted of the offensive line.
Well, Ari, they finally did it. Green Bay Packers took a wide receiver, much to Christian Watson's father's dismay. If you follow him on social media, which I don't, but I saw it. 23rd pick, they go there with Matthew Golden out of Texas. They also added North Carolina State offensive lineman Anthony Belton in the 2nd round before saying, hey, we need another receiver. 3rd round, TCU, Savion Williams. It's looking a little crowded there in Green Bay all of a sudden, isn't it?
It definitely is, but I give them a round of applause for finally taking a receiver in the first round and getting a guy who clearly fell a little bit more than they probably were expecting there with Matthew Golden, who many mocked going as high as number 12. I love it. And really, you look at the receiver room that they've had, like Jaden Reed is a good player, and Romeo Dobbs is a good player, and Christian Watson, when he's healthy, is a good player. But you really want to get that dog, that player who could really be the guy. And they have not had it. And Josh Jacobs said that when it came to, I think it was during Media Row during Super Bowl week, where it's like, we need that guy. And listen, when it comes to Golden, like he's not just a burner. I know he ran a 4.29, but this is somebody who could really run the entire route tree over here. So the Packers saw that. I also have a lot of respect when it comes to the Packers and drafting. Like, I think they're one of the better drafting teams. They look for traits. They have a really, really, really good history of drafting players all over the board throughout the draft. I mean, obviously nobody can go perfect, but they're able to find players wherever it is. So for them to go out of their way and take a receiver for the first time since 2002, when Matthew Golden was not even born yet, it tells you they really liked something about him. So I like that about them. And really, we kind of talked about this last year, but because they've had so many guys there in the receiver room, it was like, who is going to be the guy who actually steps up and becomes the guy? I don't really know if anybody truly did last year. So now you add another guy over here for Jordan Love, and you hope that maybe Golden becomes the guy, or now you have all these guys together and they're all pushing each other, and one guy comes out on top the way they've had for so many years, whether it was Devontae Adams coming out on top, or it was, Jordy Nelson coming out on top, and Donald Driver years ago coming out on top. They've always had a player that eventually came out on top who was not drafted high. Maybe this is the year where we finally find the number one guy over here with this cluster of young guys being together, and one guy finally gets ahead and really becomes the guy moving forward for Jordan Love. So that element of it, I definitely liked. And again, the rest of the Packers draft, the way I look at them, look at the entire list. At some point throughout the year, some of these guys are all of a sudden making an impact. It might not be immediate. Sometimes it takes into year two for it to happen, but this is a team that has always done a really, really good job of developing players. And it would not surprise me to do that again over here with these type of players who they took this year in the draft. But Golden by far was the most important pick that they made. And I want to see if there's going to be a bit of a trickle effect with the other receivers by them taking one in the first round for the first time in forever.
Chicago Bears wanted to get a tight end to pair with Cole Kmet. They decided to go with Michigan's Colston Loveland, not Tyler Warren, which I think a lot of people were surprised by there in the first round. That was, of course, the 10th pick in the draft. They also added Luther Burden, who is a guy who is considered by many to be the top receiver entering this past college football season. He didn't quite show up the way that they wanted it to, so they ended up getting Caleb Williams, a third receiver, second round guy. He'll now be formidably added to a trio with DJ Moore, Roma Dunze. Keenan Allen's out for now. He's still there on the free agency market, but pretty good picks. Definitely, like you spoke about yesterday, trying to see if Caleb Williams is going to be able to take that next step in his sophomore season with, quite frankly, a lot of offensive weapons around him.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that throughout the offseason basically was like, Caleb Williams, we're giving you everything. Now show it to us. And we talked about it yesterday with, Ben Johnson obviously coming in as the head coach. You obviously go out there and bring in Luther Burden. You bring in Colston Loveland. The offensive line, you address it with Drew Dahlman and Jonah Jackson and Joe Tooney. It's more of, hey, Caleb, like, what else do you want us to do over here? We gave you everything. So now it's about showing it. And this is a team that's going to go out there. We're going to see a lot of 12 personnel with Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet being there together. Colston Loveland's obviously going to be the future tight end eventually whenever the time comes to move on from Cole Kmet. It's kind of reminiscent of how the Eagles handled when they had Zach Ertz. They drafted Dallas Goedert. They had both of them and eventually became Goddard's team. That's kind of the vision that I have over here with those tight ends. But Luther Burden is also one of my favorite picks here in the draft because at the start of the collegiate season, like everyone was looking at him as a surefire first round pick, arguably the best receiver in this upcoming class. And for whatever reason, whether it was the effort stuff or there were a bunch of different things that were going out over here in the scouting community, he slips in the second round. But this is somebody who fights the ball, fights for the ball, fights through traffic. He had 11 contested catches of over 20 yards over the last 2 years there at Missouri. So this is a player who goes out there and gets it. And really, if you listen to Ben Johnson in the post-draft press conference, he said Luther Burden, one word, stud. And obviously, he had Jameson Williams in Detroit. Jameson is really close friends with Luther Burden, and Jameson actually went out of his way to text Ben Johnson to be like, "You son of a gun, you got another really good one there in Chicago with Luther." So I'm really, really excited to see this Chicago offense, and if everything clicks the way it should be, this offense has the potential to be one of the most exciting ones in football and potentially a top 5 offense in the NFL this year. And we're not even talking about the defense, which they go out there and get Shamar Turner over here in the second round. They made 3 second-round picks. All the players they added throughout the course of the offseason, whether it was Dio Odigbo from the Colts, Grady Jarrett, of course, from the Atlanta Falcons, and all the players they already had on defense with Dennis Allen now calling the plays. This is a team that really feels complete with all the players they have on the offensive side, the defensive side, and also on special teams as well. So this could be one of the more exciting teams in football, but it has to happen first, and that's a big part of it. We always talk about on paper. Last year, the Bears on paper looked really good. Now it's about actually showing it to us in September, October, November, and with this coaching staff, it's definitely possible.
On to the NFC South with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who apparently just want to throw the ball every single play. That seems to be the plan because they took Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. He's joining the party for Baker Mayfield with the 19th pick. They also added the secondary with Notre Dame cornerback Benjamin Morrison late in the second round. They then once again took another cornerback in the third with Jacob Parrish of K-State. Oh, and they took another wide receiver in the 7th round for just for fun, Tez Johnson out of Oregon. Do you think that the Buccaneers had Egbuka circled the entire way as the guy they really wanted there with the 19th pick and nothing was going to stop them from taking him?
No, I wouldn't say he was circled. I think they really liked Michael Williams, who went number 11 to the 49ers. I thought Jahad Campbell, the linebacker, who went 31 to the Eagles, he was a player also who was a bit of a potential need for them with Levante David getting up there in age. But again, we mentioned the injuries before, and they were like maybe concerned a little bit about that. But this is a little bit of a luxury pick. But at the same time, the receiver room is old, and Mike Evans last year got injured with the hamstring. Obviously, they brought back Chris Godwin, 3 years, $66 million, but he's also still rehabbing. They obviously drafted McMillan last year, who is somebody who's ascending. But Egbuka is one of the most reliable, safe, gets things done for you players in this draft. Like everyone was telling me, put him in the first round. Don't make that mistake because he is somebody who's similar to Terry McLaurin, where no one talks about him, but whenever you need a big play, he'll do it for you. And obviously, both those guys went to Ohio State, and I put him in the first round. And the Buccaneers, best player available. We talked about last time how they have been one of the better drafting teams. Jason Light deserves a lot of credit. John Spytek, who was there, deserves a lot of credit for that as well. They just know how to do it. And even like their second round pick, Benjamin Morrison, coming back from an injury, you have to be comfortable with that, which clearly they were in the second round, taking a player off an injury. But the Bucs only had 7 interceptions last year. Morrison had 9 interceptions the last 2 years on his own. He is somebody who had 19 pass breakups during those last 2 years. A guy who has a knack for the football. His phone call with Todd Bowles was a really cool one because his father actually played with Todd Bowles in the NFL. So that was pretty cool. A nice full circle moment there. But their picks are all about getting players who could contribute right away. They're a really good scouting team as well, and they always find players who contribute. As I said earlier in the episode, they had the most homegrown players on their 53-man roster last year. I think it was 49 out of 53 players on their roster last year were homegrown guys. They know how to find players on this team. So look at their entire draft. These are guys who will make their roster. If they don't make it with them, they'll find their way to a roster on a different team. They know how to find players, and I think they did it once again this year. You might say Egbuka doesn't fit on the team, too many receivers. He'll find his way on the field, and he'll become a player for them down the line eventually once those aging players move out.
19th pick in the draft. I sure hope he does. All right. Atlanta Falcons. One word. Aggressive. They went in wanting to get edge rushers, and that is what they did. They got Georgia hybrid edge Jalen Walker with the 15th pick. I think a lot of people thought he was going to be going there 8 to Carolina, who we'll get to in a moment. That was available for them at 15. So they said, sure, we'll take him. And the guy that they seemingly were interested in at that pick was James Pierce Jr. Well, 11 picks later, he was still available. They called the Rams, and they paid big to go out there and get them. So they only had 3 other picks the rest of the way. They went safety, tackle. The weapons seemed to be there last season. The defense was definitely in need of some more talent. Matthew Judon's gone. They actually spent some value getting him last year. and not surprisingly went for the edges, although I'm a little surprised that they went with a guy who's still learning to be an edge rusher and another guy that has quote unquote motor problems. Am I the only one who thinks it's a little bit risky that they went with these two guys, particularly for the price they paid?
I think the way the process went, just for the context of all this, because I also criticized them and I still think they paid too much. I do think their plan was to take Pierce at 15. And like you said, they didn't think Jalen Walker would be there. Once Walker was there, they're like, we have these two pass rushers. They're both in the same bucket, as we say. One is just a clean prospect who essentially is like a coach on the field. His father is a coach. He's basically a coach as a player, really good character guy. And then you have Pierce, who there were some character concerns with him, even though he's an exceptional player. So when both players in the same bucket, we're going to take the safe player over here with Walker at 15. Then they were like, "What Pierce is kind of falling here. We want to address the pass rush anyways. Let's go out and get it." Like again, the value they gave up felt like too much for me. Essentially, they gave up a first round pick, got a third round pick back next year. So they slide down 60 picks in the draft next year to go out and get Pierce this year. That's the math that they did. And now they're like, hey, our pass rush unit, which has been awful forever. They've had the least sacks in the NFL since 2018. Now you have Walker, you have Pierce, you have Leonard Floyd, who you signed in free agency, you have Arnold and McKinney, who dropped in the second round last year. Now at least we have some guys there on the defensive line who could get to the quarterback. I don't know if I love the process of how they did it. I don't like the fact that they gave him a first round pick, but I get the fact that they were like, listen, our defense stunk last year. We couldn't get to the quarterback. Jimmy Lake, the defensive coordinator, was not a fit. We ended up hiring, obviously, Jeff Ulbrich, who had his own story this past week with his son, but he becomes a new defensive coordinator. Now we have guys who can at least get to the quarterback, and they believe that first round pick they gave back is not going to be a top 10, top 15 pick. They believe it's going to be, obviously, they hope it to be as late as possible, but it's likely going to fall somewhere in the 20s because we're going to make the playoffs at the very least. So if that ends up happening, then okay, fine. You got two really good pass rushers. Walker is going to become a full-time edge likely and can be used in many different ways. Pierce was a pressure machine over at college. Last year, before this past season, had a 19.6% pressure rate. Like, he gets to the quarterback. It's more about making sure he stays committed to football and you're able to control him a little bit. If you're able to, he's going to be really good for this defense as well. So I get where they're coming from. I just don't think they had to give up a future first round pick to make this happen, but they ended up doing that. And we'll see how it all unfolds over here. But they believe with Michael Penix, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, the offensive line where it is, and now this defense of all those pieces and a new defensive coordinator, they should be able to compete with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who have been winning the division the last several years over here.
New Orleans ended up being the landing spot for Texas offensive lineman Kelvin Banks Jr. He'd been rocketing up the boards over the last month of the draft. They take him there with the 9th pick. They also took potentially their starting quarterback for this upcoming season, Tyler Shuck, out of a Louisville nursing home. As far as I'm aware, all I keep hearing is how old he is. So I don't know, 40th pick in the draft. That's where they went. They took my guy, Devin Neal, in the 6th round out of Kansas, Rock Chalk. He'll be complimenting Alvin Kamara this season. It seemed like an okay draft for the Saints. Nothing too sexy, but what did you make of it?
Tyler Shuck is obviously the big one over here because Derek Carr shoulder injury, he addressed it at a church, I think, this past week, saying it's real. I could show you the MRI. Again, people in the NFL are not buying it. They believe he just doesn't want to be there anymore. But I think Tyler Shuck is going to start games at some point this year, whenever it is. I mean, Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner are the other guys here on the roster. So he's going to play, and he's probably been in the most pro-ready offense, and he's probably had the amount of time he's been in college has been forever. This guy was the craziest stat I saw this week that he played with Jawan Johnson, who is now his teammate in New Orleans, who just signed his second contract in the NFL. So this has been somebody who has been in college for a very, very long time. He was Justin Herbert's backup in college. So he's been around for a while. You could drop it in and he could play in the NFL right now. How great will he be is a whole different question, but they were comfortable with him at number 40. Calvin Banks being the pick in the first round. We mentioned how he was at mocks at 20s in early April. We're like, get him out of there. He's going to be a top 10 pick. He has to go to the top 10. The big question really with Banks is some teams did view him as a guard. Are you viewing him as a guard or an offensive tackle? Obviously, the Saints are viewing him as an offensive tackle. You're not taking a guard at number 9 over there. But for them, they've had to really fix up this offensive line. 4 out of their last 6 first-round picks, I believe, have been on offensive linemen over here, or 3 of their last 5 have been on offensive linemen with Fuaga last year, Trevor Penny, Kelvin Banks. Like, they've had to use a lot of picks over here on the offensive line. They hope it is finally fixed over here with now taking Banks over here to be on the left side. You put Fuaga over on the right side, and you hope now that it's basically settled moving forward for the long term. Decline the 5th-year option of Trevor Penny. But this is a roster that we've mentioned a lot of times. It's an aging roster of like a DeMario Davis and Cameron Jordan and Derek Carr and his huge cap in next year of $69 million. Like, they have to take their medicine eventually with a salary cap, and that's likely coming next year. But this is a roster over here. They're going to give Kellen Moore some time over here with figuring out the roster. They had a lot of draft picks over here they brought in. And it's more about just finding young guys and moving into the next era and eventually getting out of this cap mess and moving forward eventually with a cleaner slate of year for Kellen Moore. Does Tyler Shuck become the guy? I have no idea. There were definitely Tyler Shuck fans around the NFL. He had a bunch of injuries that were more broken bones, more. It's not necessarily somebody who is injury prone per se. It's more these freak accidents that he's had. So you're expecting him to stay healthy. And I think they're going to have an answer on him this year, whether they like him or not. If they don't, they go right back into the wall next year to try to find a quarterback, I would say.
Another one, Tyler Shuck also went to high school with Cody Bellinger, the player for the New York Yankees. He's in his 9th season in the MLB, for those who are curious. So gives you a little bit of context of the age. All right, let's wrap up the NFC South here with the Carolina Panthers. Panthers were very much in the running for Jalen Walker. I think a lot of people thought that was going to be the 8th pick. They go with Teteroa McMillan, the Arizona wideout, to add to a collection of weapons for Bryce Young. They also went with Texas A&M pass rusher Nick Scorton later on in the draft in the 2nd round, even added an Etienne there in the 4th round. Obviously, little brother action there. I was surprised by T-Mac, not Tet, going there with the 8th pick. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just trying to go into this year where we want to see Bryce Young actually show us that he is the true franchise quarterback over here. After this season, he officially becomes extension eligible as well. So you give him all the pieces right now. He and T-Mac have actually been training over the last couple of weeks. So there is a bit of a connection there. And the front office of Dan Morgan and head coach Dave Canales, they're like, you know what? Let's go out of here, give him the guy, and basically go into this year with this offense, with the offensive line, which was fortified last year. Chuba Hubbard, they extended during the year. Now you have your 2 receivers of McMillan and Leggett. You have Coker, who they love. And then the veterans of Adam Thielen, they just signed Hunter Renfrow as well. So you have some guys over here on this team, Trimble and JT Sanders as tight ends as well. Like, there are pieces on the offense, and it's more about seeing Bryce Young. We mentioned the pass rush. Like, they could have taken Jalen Walker at number 8. They could have taken Walter Nolan, who I know they really liked, at number 8. I think they thought T-Mac was actually going to go number 5 to the Jaguars. And, of course, we know what Jacksonville did. So they took the receiver at 8, and they doubled down on pass rushes at 51 of Scoreton. And then, of course, at 777 as well with the Mississippi pass rusher as well. So that was the route they ended up taking with this draft. They really do need to address pass rusher. They're hoping they're able to hit on one of those guys in rounds 2 or 3 because Clowney, Wadham, both veterans on the team, final year of their contracts. But I get the plan for them where it's about let's be all in with our quarterback and see if he is truly the guy over here going into 2025.
All right, Ari, we're on to the very final division that we're going to be covering here, the NFC West. Seattle Seahawks. They went with a part-time farmer and part-time offensive lineman and Gray Zabel from North Dakota State with the 18th pick. They picked up South Carolina safety Nick Emuwari, Miami tight end Elijah Arroyo in the 2nd round before taking Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe in true Russell Wilson form in the 3rd round. I was meh on the Rams picks. We will obviously get to them in just a second, but man, do I love this draft here for the Seattle Seahawks.
I'm right there with you. I mean, Zabel, finally, you addressed the interior of the offensive line. It's been an issue for a while. Your new quarterback, Sam Darnold, I mean, he was haunted by it at the end of the year in Minnesota. Zabel could literally play all five positions. Like, he played four of them throughout his college career. He showed what he could do at center in the Senior Bowl, which is a nasty dude. Love that pick there in the first round. The safety they took, Emanwari, he is a unique athlete who could really play a number of roles there as a safety. He's a hybrid safety. Mike McDonald, the head coach, defensive coordinator formerly in Baltimore, he had that with Kyle Hamilton. Seattle knows that really well with Cam Chancellor. You could use him in that role there for that defense. A perfect fit for what Mike McDonald is looking for. Even Christian Arroyo, he would have gotten higher if not for all the injuries, the tight end of Miami. They take the flyer with him. He has to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, he could become a target there for Sam Darnold in that offense. And of course, Jalen Milroe taking him at pick number 92. I like that as well. I mean, John Schneider, the GM, has been there forever. He's only drafted three quarterbacks over the course of his career as GM in Seattle. It was Russell Wilson, Alex McHugh in the seventh round, and now Jalen Milroe. And Milroe is a really unique talent because his running ability, it's right there with Lamar Jackson. It's the throwing stuff that kind of needs to be fixed up over here. Like, he's actually good in the middle of the field. It's everywhere else where it's kind of all over the place. If you work with him, Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator, works with him, like, this is somebody who maybe could become a third round hit once again, just like Russell Wilson once was. And we've spoken about the Sam Darnold contract. 3 years, $110 million. It's really a 1 year, $37.5 million deal. So Sam better perform it. If he doesn't, there is somebody there on the bench right now who, with proper development, could become a guy in the NFL because his running ability is legit. It's more about figuring out the throwing mechanics, which we saw it happen with Lamar Jackson, where running was great. They took their time with the running game, and eventually they opened up the passing game with him. Mike McDonald also saw that firsthand a little bit also in Baltimore. So he was there with Lamar. So I think this is one of the more intriguing picks in the entire draft. If they give him some time, maybe just maybe Joe Miller becomes a guy in the NFL.
All right, let's go back to the team that I accidentally skipped and meant to start with. That would be the Los Angeles Rams. They were the ones who won the division, so we should have started them. So apologies to the
Not
Rams.
nice.
Yeah, not nice. F them picks has always been the motto there. Of late, they decided they're going to keep their first. This year, they had the first. They decided to trade it, although, they get more draft stock. Now they got two first next year. We'll see if they actually have them. Sean McVay is not convinced they will. But ultimately, they still go in the second round and take Terrence Ferguson with their first pick. That's the second rounder, like I was mentioning, followed by Michigan edge Josiah Stewart in the third. No Matthew Stafford successor in sight, which I was surprised by. How do you feel about this group? Because I don't come away thinking that they knocked it out of the park.
I would say the Rams were one of the more deeper rosters in the NFL. And they actually did not have to address so many needs over here in this draft. So I think that was part of the process here, which is why they were trying to trade up a little bit here in the first round. And of course, they just couldn't get a deal done. I think that probably was for Colston Loveland, but of course, he went number 10 over here. So they moved back at an extra first round pick. You mentioned that addressing the future franchise quarterback. Having 2 ones next year definitely helps them have a chance to get that next year. So that played a big role over here as well. Getting that one is huge for the Rams right now, where you have Matthew Stafford year to year, 37 years old. You could be in a situation next year where you could put together some sort of a trade package and maybe get your quarterback next year in the draft. The tight end out of Oregon, Ferguson. I mean, hearing Sean McVay talk a little bit about him and how excited he is about him, like, we know Tyler Higbee has dealt with injuries, getting up there in age. He spoke a little bit about Ferguson as a Chris Cooley, if you guys remember, from Washington, who Sean McVay, of course, was in Washington. That is a pretty cool comparison. He even mentioned Travis Kelce as well. So we mentioned before how good the Rams are at drafting players, especially in those rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Only 6 picks in this draft, the least they've had since 2016, I believe. But those 6 players that they drafted, plus the 15 undrafted free agents, once again, they know how to find talent. And would not surprise me if some of these guys end up sticking and having an impact for this team in 2025. And now also they've stockpiled their picks over here in 2026, especially that first round of 2 first-round picks, where they are ready, where they have all these young players, a young nucleus of players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where especially now in 2026, you'll be ready to take that next step over there, potentially with the quarterback or a different position. You have stockpile those picks over here in the future as well. So I get the process they had over here, especially the roster of where it's at right now. They have a pretty deep roster of a lot of really good players. I think they could address quarterback over here at some point, and they did mention Jalen Ramsey reunion as a possibility there in LA. So I would keep an eye on that one.
All right, Arizona Cardinals. They went with Ole Miss defensive tackle Walter Nolan with the 16th pick, who was somebody I know that you said a lot of teams were actually higher on than maybe we realized, and ultimately he goes there right bang in the middle of the first round. They then took a steal, an absolute steal, with a banged up Michigan cornerback Will Johnson, all the way down at 47. I know a lot of people actually had him mocked in the middle to early first round in some cases. They're anywhere from 10 on. A few other guys with some upside later on in the draft. What do you think about Arizona and what they did to help bolster that defense that we both know really needed some help as a team that had typically been overperforming on the defensive end with the talent they had there already?
Yeah, this is a pivotal year for the Jonathan Gannon defense, and this could have been truly a defense transforming draft for them. I mean, Walter Nolan was the player who I think was a top 5 talent in this draft. Like, he was a high recruit. His ceiling is probably higher than Mason Graham. We've mentioned that. It's more of just letting the fire for him. Like, sometimes it's like he just feels like not working or whatever it is. And it's like, if Jonathan Gannon can just get everything out of him, Walter Nolan is going to be a really, really good player in the NFL. Like, on his call, he was like, give me the playbook. I want to be there. Like, that's the type of energy you need around Walter Nolan if you want to get everything out of him. And the Cardinals made a very, very slick move, signing Calais Campbell before the draft. There is no better mentor for Walter Nolan than Calais Campbell, has been playing forever over here. But the Cardinals had probably the worst defensive front in the NFL last year. It was one of the worst in the NFL. And now going into this year, you have Josh Sweat, who you signed, Donovan Tomlinson, who you signed, Calais Campbell, who you signed, Walter Nolan, who you drafted, and then BJ Ojolari, a recent draft pick, Darius Robinson, first round pick last year, Baron Browner, who they traded for last year and re-signed this offseason. Like, that defensive front, in a snap of a finger, has gone from being one of the worst to being one of the better ones in the NFL, just like that. So this was an unbelievable draft for Arizona and really an unbelievable offseason for them in transforming that part of the defense. And then Will Johnson, I mean, listen, the speed, the injury concerns, there were obviously teams who just did not like it. There was a toe, there was a hamstring, there was a knee. He said his knee is fine. There's a longevity question with him. Whatever it is, the Cardinals are looking at this as we're getting a player who's supposed to be going in the first round. We get him at 47. If he just becomes a one contract player for us, that is good enough as well. So Will Johnson, his 2023 tape, he looked like a top 10 pick. Whatever the concerns were, and I think it's a longevity thing for a player like him. He did not run the 40 as well, which teams were a little bit upset about. But if you're getting the Will Johnson that we saw in 2023, and you get 4 or 5 years of that, that pick is worth it. I mean, right away it becomes worth it. And that becomes a defense right now, which was, like you said, overperformed for the talent that they had. They could become a really good defense over here moving forward this year of all the moves that they made. So I like the draft that the Cardinals had. You guys know how high I was in Arizona last year. I thought they overperformed. This year is really when it all has to come together with offense, defense, special teams, where they've been building the last couple of years. They've had some really good drafts. The offensive line has gotten better. Kyler Murray has really become a leader and a really good, guy around the team, and has had his moments as well. The offense with Trey McBride, you want to see more out of Marvin Harrison. You want to see somebody step up as a number 2 receiver. This is the year where you're hoping everything comes together and this team could compete in the NFC West.
And then there was one, Ari. Finally, the San Francisco 49ers. No team more decimated during the offseason than these guys, arguably. It was going to be hyper important that they go into the draft and try to fill a lot of spots. They went with Georgia defensive end Michael Williams with the 11th pick, Texas defensive tackle Alfred Collins in the second, Oklahoma State linebacker Nick Martin in the third. They did take Ole Miss wideout Jordan Watkins with the last pick of the fourth round. And I was surprised that the 49ers went defense with all 5 picks ahead of him. Do you think that they still have significant holes on this roster they need to fill with guys now like Deebo Samuel out the door, Brandon Ayuk still up in the air?
I'm not really concerned about the weapons over here. Brock Purdy obviously will get paid over here very soon. It's going to come in a little bit over $15 million once it officially gets done. George Kittle will also eventually get paid as well, entering no more guaranteed money on his contract. I mean, you look at the receiver core, like Ayuk will be back from injury whenever it is, whether it's the start of the season or a little bit after that. They like the receivers with Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings. Like, there are guys they signed to Marcus Robinson this offseason. Like, they're okay with the receivers. They're okay at tight end. I was a little bit shocked that they didn't really address offensive line, at least early in this draft, because Jarren Williams is getting up there in age. They obviously lost some guys here this offseason, like an Aaron Banks, who got a lot of money. Jalen Moore was more of a reserve guy, but they lost him as well. I mean, you look at the offensive line, like there are some guys over here where I'm a little bit concerned for Brock Purdy. That's the only thing over here that I was a little bit surprised about. But looking at their draft, they made a bunch of picks over here. We mentioned how they were injury riddled last year. Michael Williams is far from a, you know, final product over here. Like, he still has, he's more of a developmental guy, a project over here. He was expecting to have a better year this past year, had a nagging ankle injury, which he suffered early on, did not have the breakout season he was expecting. But you're going to pair him up with Nick Bosa over here. They had to go with defense, whether it was first round or second round or whatever. They had to address the defensive line, that they did over here. They get Michael Williams. That's somebody who, with their staff, with Robert Saleh, they're going to work on getting him better over here. 14 sacks in his last 3 years at Georgia. I just think he was expecting a better year this past year, and that ankle injury definitely bothered him. My favorite pick really they made was Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle out of Texas. This is somebody who, you look at the entire just defensive tackle room in San Francisco with Malik Collins gone, Javon Hargrave gone, moving on from an Eric Armstead a couple years ago, Javon Kinlaw a couple years ago. Like, it has been depleted of the interior. And getting a guy like Collins, 6'6", 332 pounds. I thought he might go a little bit earlier than pick number 43, somewhere in those 30s in this draft over here. They ended up getting him at 43. He was an exceptional run stuffer, and I think he's going to be a day one starter for them. So that was really one of my more favorite picks of here. Some of their other picks over here, like a Nick Martin, the linebacker, they obviously lost Drake Greenlaw, felt a little bit like reaches. But, when you look at a team like this is a team over here that has also had a lot of success with drafting players in those middle rounds of the draft. Again, it's not perfect. No team is perfect. But you look at the history of this team, they've had a lot of success finding players over here. So I'm not going to question some of it. But when you look at the consensus board of some of these players, like, they were way off on some of them, but clearly they saw something over here to take those guys. But that's where I'm looking at this 49ers team. I was surprised they didn't address offensive line a little bit earlier. And then I do believe they're just expected to get some of these players back from injury and be healthy, especially the offensive side of the ball. So I was not surprised they were not heavy on the weapon side of things over here. Christian McCaffrey as well. He'll be back this year, which is a big deal.
Ari just did this episode off of basically no sleep, and there was no better time to do our longest episode ever. So thank you guys for who listened all the way to this point. I have no idea where we actually are time-wise, but make sure you hit subscribe so you can get more content like this. Probably not going through 32 teams anytime soon in one episode again. Thank you for all the support during the draft. It was wonderful to see some of the numbers continue to grow. So continue, subscribe, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, as I always love to say. And that's all I got for you, Ari.
That will do it here for our Tuesday, April 29 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. My brain is truly fried. Like Ben said, I had a red-eye flight last night. Got back in. We're doing this episode right now. Did probably our longest episode we've ever done. Yeah, my brain's a little bit fried. But we will be back here tomorrow morning talking more about NFL. It's going to be, I would imagine, a much shorter episode. And the NFL Spotlight weekly guest, we're going to be picking that up over here very, very soon as the offseason kind of hits a little bit of its quiet part of the offseason here moving forward. So we'll see all of you here tomorrow morning.